Welcome to Hotel Cordyceps, where you can check in any time, but you'll probably turn into a mushroom-headed monster. The Last of Us is here with episode 2, and we have all the details you missed. I'm your friendly fungus fan, Max Lichtig. Let's dive right in. Anyone who played the original game knew that Tess's death was coming, but man, she only made it to episode 2? Harsh. After being bitten by a creepy crawly clicker, Tess has a very limited amount of time left before she is mouth-tentacling Joel and Ellie. There is also the matter of the fungal web of sensors that have alerted a horde of screaming mushroom zombies to the group's location. Tess makes a last stand that results in a massive and budget-consuming fireball. This sequence is, like many in the show, almost an exact recreation of the same sequence in the video game. Even the location is identical, taking place in the decrepit lobby of the Boston State House. Additionally, the State House, or the Capitol, is one of the fantastic levels in the criminally underrated multiplayer of the Last of Us game. So, Tess, I know how it feels to die in the exact same atrium. Me and you, we're practically the same. But most importantly, Anna Torv delivers an amazing final performance as the doomed love interest, and it's just a shame she's gone so soon. Hey, at least I get to see her in the conclusionary season of Mindhunter. What's that? Oh, it's been canceled. Netflix? Why do I even bother? Episode 2 gives us an introduction to the fearsome clicker. These poor, late-stage infected souls have gone blind from the mushrooms growing out of their faces. That ominous clicking is a form of echolocation that they use to hear their prey in the dark. These clickers are introduced in almost the same way as they are in the game, hunting the trio through an abandoned building. That's not where the faithfulness ends, however. The screeches, clicks, and grunts coming out of the monsters are actually provided by the same two actors in both the show and the game. Misty Lee and Philip Kovacs play the female and male clickers, respectively, and reprise their vocal work for the HBO adaptation. I guess Marlene isn't the only person playing the same character from the show to the game. It's also nice to see someone else getting work making random noises. Frank Welker has monopolized that role long enough. When the trio ultimately make it out of the quarantine zone, we finally get to see where HBO's huge piles of money went. The city of Boston has been completely destroyed and reclaimed by nature. The skyscrapers stand desolate, if they are even standing at all. This is a very faithful recreation of the video game setting. By the way, if you want to make this video a little bit more fun, take a shot every time I say how much the show is faithful to the game. Actually don't, you might die. The specific imagery of the fallen tower leaning up against another one is taken exactly from the background of some of the early levels. The way that nature has crept back in, with grass and vines covering old cars and buildings, is something that made The Last of Us stand out from other zombie games of the time. When the original PS3 game was being hyped, Druckmann often talked about how the post-apocalypse was basically the end for humanity, but not as much for animals and plants. Apparently, Druckmann was considering having the virus infect animals too, but ultimately, the wildlife we see in the show has seemed to only affect humans and not other mammals. Which is good. I mean, could you imagine a primetime HBO show that featured a zombie bear? That would be so dumb. Episode 2 gives us a snippet of the backstory of how Ellie was first bitten, and yes, that is a bit of a double entendre. She tells Tess and Joel that she was making her way through an abandoned mall when she was attacked and escaped with a fresh zombie bite on her arm. She leaves some things out, however, at least if the canon is the same as the game. The biggest piece of DLC for the first game was a prequel called Left Behind, which lets you play through these events. Spoilers if you don't want to know what happens, because the trailer does allude that the show will go into this, but basically, Ellie breaks into a mall with her best friend and first crush, Riley Abel. Riley and Ellie are inseparable, and together they rifle through a world filled with artifacts connected to a world long gone, like arcade machines and clothing stores. Things go south though, and just as Ellie starts to feel the fuzzies for Riley, which is no small feat in a world of desolation, they both end up getting bitten by the infected. Riley isn't as lucky as Ellie though, and she ends up succumbing to the spores. It's a heartbreaking moment for Ellie, but don't worry, she'll get a girl eventually. As Ellie learns in The Last of Us Part 2, there are always other fish in the sea. A brutally infected post-apocalyptic sea with mutated zombie fish, but a sea nonetheless. Tess says, you step on a patch of cordyceps in one place, you'll wake a dozen infected somewhere else. We actually never got to see the mycelial connection this deeply explored in the game, but it makes perfect sense. Fungus is known to have extensive networks in the real world. In fact, the world's largest organism is a honey mushroom network in Oregon's Blue Mountains. These mushrooms would stretch to almost 4 square miles if laid flat, and they cover more than 2,300 acres. And that was Screen Rant's Mushroom Fact of the Day. Make sure you're subscribed to Screen Rant to get your daily dose of fun fungal factoids. Daily mushroom facts not guaranteed, as we frankly have more important things to do, but you should still subscribe to Screen Rant if you haven't already, just to see what happens. And now, back to flesh-eating zombies. This episode's prologue character Ibu Ratna learns that cordyceps have evolved to infect humans, and that there are infected people running around Jakarta. She has an appropriate reaction. Side note, very interesting move to have the outbreak start in Jakarta as opposed to South America where it starts in the game. It works because this episode's opening, just like the first episode's prologue, is stellar. But anyway, Ratna claims that with fungus this aggressive, there is no medicine or vaccine. Her suggestion to the military captain is,
Bom seluruh kota dan seluruh orang yang ada di dalamnya.
oof, chills. This is what world leaders ultimately decide to do, and we see the effects of this in both the game and the show. The world is filled with markings of major bombings, and Tess also explains how it all went down to Elle later on in the episode. She remarks that it was used to slow the spread, and that it worked here, but didn't in most places. Explosions and hellfire seem to be the best way of dealing with shambling portobellos, and Tess ultimately ends up resorting to this when she goes out in a blaze of glory. Also, she seemed to be super committed to that Zippo when she had literal grenades lying at her feet. Ah yes, the Zippo that refuses to start till the most dramatic moment trope. An undeniably tried and true one. Still, it's a little soon to be doing it again, don't you think, when you just had it in Uncharted? Get it together, Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog. In this episode, we get to know a lot more about the precious cargo that Joel is tasked with protecting. Elle may seem tough, ready to stab some legs and sass some adults at a moment's notice, but she still has a lot to learn. And boy will she. There are a few key moments that portray Ellie's inexperience. She has had limited run-ins with the infected, only really dealing with runners. She clearly has never killed an infected before, judging by her conversation with Joel. And she mostly sticks to hiding and fleeing when the team comes up against a pair of clickers. She even scores a second bite. In the video game, Ellie starts out as a companion, but quickly develops her own deadly skills. You do end up playing as her directly in both the original game and its follow-up. Of course, she racks up an impressive body count of zombies and dangerous humans. So you can expect to see a similar progression in the show, judging at how faithful it's been so far. You can take another shot, by the way. At this point, Ellie has had her first encounter with the clickers, but there is another version of the infected she brings up earlier. When the group is traveling along the bridge, Ellie is asking about how the infected work and why they aren't being attacked now. She asks if the stories she has heard are true and if there really is an infected that explodes spores at you. And yes, Ellie, yes there is. So this is the Bloater, who I mentioned in the last video. Well, it's time to talk a little bit more about these disgusting monsters. It's a fun job I have. They do indeed, as the name suggests, just like a night after KFC, bloat up. They will shamble towards you, like the world's least fun piñata, and try to grab your face. If they do, it's all downhill from there. They are also effectively armor-plated, with large hard shrooms covering most of their body. So good luck with that shotgun. It's unknown if they will show up in the HBO series, but I will put good money on it. And hey, maybe they can get Stellan Skarsgård to play one and he can just reuse his fat suit from Dune. It's a win-win. When the group enters the dilapidated hotel, Ellie is the first to voice her obvious concerns about entering that rank-ass pool of water. It's mostly because she can't swim, for justifiable reasons.
Do you think we have pools in the QC?
No, smartass.
This is true of both her live-action and pixelated versions. The game often had Joel solving puzzles that involved how to get Ellie across a room or past an obstacle. A few involved having to swim around looking for a plank or something to get Ellie across a body of water. Even when things are incredibly tense, you still have to take time to get her to walk on a piece of wood and float her over like she was the queen of the apocalypse. Okay, so apparently I have some unresolved anger issues involving the physics puzzles from The Last of Us. I'm sorry. In the second episode, we get a much wider look of the devastation and destruction the cordyceps fungus has done to humanity and to the city of Boston. The show is still sticking close to the game, and it looks like it will continue that trend with the introduction of Ron Swanson as Bill. It's just so faithful in the best way. Speaking of which, if you've been playing that drinking game, which I said not to, you can probably stop right now, if you haven't already passed out.